This is Strange Truths and Tall Tales, the product of Newfoundland podcast. It's a place for people who are into Newfoundland stories. Stick with me and we'll explore everything from murderous mummers to tobogganing dictators, with a healthy dose of pop culture too. It's a crazy mix, I know, but it sort of makes sense to me. I'm Robert, I write at productofnewfoundland.ca. In this episode, I've got Christmas traditions on my mind. Not the ancient ones really, though there are plenty of those. Today, I'm thinking about a couple of newer holiday customs, Tibb's Eve and Christmas Slush. I'm not doing it alone, though. I've got help from the Duds, who will chat with me about their song, Before the Night, Tibb's Eve, and food blogger Instagrammer Jeremy Way, aka Stuff That In Your Gob. He helps me wrap my head around the whole Christmas slush tradition. After that, I've got a format-busting segment of Monsters Things, where I'll temporarily set aside my See Monsters in the News plan and instead talk about scary creatures from Newfoundland lore that were invoked to make kids behave, especially around Christmas time. Let's get to it. You're traveling through the fog, and just ahead is an island of ghosts, murderers, and mummers. Your next stop, Newfoundland. And these are its strange truths and tall tales. In a recent social media exchange, I saw someone, who's a Newfoundlander, question the truth of a bunch of supposed Newfoundland customs. And if I'm honest, there were a lot of items on the list that were new to me too. I just never heard of them. And that's sort of the thing about Newfoundland culture. There really isn't a singular one. There is no one Newfoundland culture. Your experience of life on this island depends entirely on where you live and where your ancestors came from. One of the customs on the list, though, was something I'd lived with my whole life. Tibb's Eve. For me, Tibb's Eve is the 23rd of December. It is Christmas Eve Eve. It's the unofficial start of the Christmas season. It's the time when families and friends have begun to return to their small coastal communities, and the feeling of Christmas begins to feel real. It's a time to start celebrating. For some people, Tibb's Eve means partying and consuming alcohol. The connection is so strong that the day is known as Tipsy Eve or Tips Eve. I have a friend that grew up on the island's south coast who always knew the day as Tipsy Eve. It's been suggested that December 23rd is the day people often broke out the home brews and wines they put up for the Christmas season. Their sampling, or maybe their oversampling, led to the name Tipsy Eve. I'm not sure whether Tibb's Eve became Tipsy Eve or vice versa. But one thing is relatively certain. The phrase Tibb's Eve is older. But it didn't necessarily have anything to do with December 23rd or Christmas. There's an old English expression, till Tibb's Eve. It basically means until some day that will never come. Sometimes it's described as a day that is neither before nor after Christmas. In the time and place the phrase evolved, there really was no Tibb's Eve on the calendar. If someone were to say, we'll be shoveling snow from now till Tibb's Eve, they meant they'd be doing it forever. They'd be doing it until a day that didn't exist arrived. The origin of this usage of Tibb's Eve is perhaps a bit clearer than the December 23rd thing. Tibb is thought to refer to a person, a woman of ill repute, someone associated with debauchery. If there was going to be an Eve of Tibb, it was likely because she'd been made a saint and had a festival day. Given her reputation, that probably wasn't in the cards, so waiting for Tibb's Eve was waiting for something that wasn't going to happen. Despite having created an actual Tibb's Eve here in Newfoundland, the phrase meaning a day that will never come is still in use, at least to some degree. I remember my grandfather saying it. But how did December 23rd become Tibb's Eve? It's not really clear. But whatever the origin, it doesn't seem to have gained a foothold in the culture until the 1900s. Maybe it's an evolution of Tipsy, or maybe it's a reflection of the anticipation of Christmas and how it can feel too far away sometimes. What is clear is that Tibb's Eve has gained plenty of cultural significance. It's largely seen as a day for partying, bar hopping, and socializing with friends. There's a whole commercial application of the day. Bars advertise their Tibb's Eve parties, and local shops sell their Tibb's Eve t-shirts. That isn't the way the day is for everyone. I can't remember a time I didn't know December 23rd was Tibb's Eve. But I was an adult before I knew there was any party atmosphere connected to the day. As a kid, it was sort of the start of Christmas, sort of the last night before the big night, the last sleep before Santa arrived. I was curious about other people's take on the day. I asked Melanie O'Brien and Philip Goodridge of the Duds. They have a song called Before the Night, Tibb's Eve. I asked them about their inspiration behind the song. What inspired you to name a song after Tibb's Eve?
Oh, well, I love Tibbs Eve. I always have. My friends every year get together on Tibbs Eve, the same like kind of small group of us. And when I was younger, like my whole like high school class used to get together on Tibbs Eve, like in our early 20s. So it was always like this kind of like party, and it was always just fun, and something crazy and silly and fun always happened. And it was always a big deal. Even in my house growing up, it was when we would open presents from our family that lived away. My mother's family from Fogo, we would open the presents. So it was always just this big thing. And it's interesting to me because some people haven't heard of it and some people don't celebrate it. But for me, it was always special. And and then I researched a bit the history, and I found that so cool that like Tibbs Eve is considered time out of time, or it's like it's related to the saying a quarter to never, when they're like, oh yeah, they'll get married in Tibbs Eve. Apparently it was a joke, which meant that was never going to happen. It was something that if he said it would happen on Tibbs Eve, it would never happen because it never really did happen. It's time out of time. So that's where that inspiration for that song came. And it was so, because it was like about these two people who end up together and maybe they get snowed in together for the rest of the season, but at the same time, it never happened. Do you know what I mean? So I had a lot of fun with that. And then Phil, of course, Phil comes in and makes everything so much better than when I started.
Well, listen, vice versa. We do that for each other, and it's really easy to do. Like when the source material is that good, like there's so much play that you can have, like so much you can do. And it was great too because when you brought the song, I was like, that's a hit. I know that it's a hit. And the version that you sent was just you and guitar, or was it? No, it was on piano. It was on piano, and with some background vocals. And I was like, I'm not sure what I hear, but I hear some beats, I hear some stuff, and it took us a while to sort of. With us, there's two things that happen. Either it like all flows and funnels together real quick, or we take some time and play around with it until we find the right. And before the night, Tibbs Eve, and it's not in a bad way at all. That one we were playing with different things until we were trying to fine tune it. And I think when we finally found the sound, it was like off the runway. Then it was really great putting it together. It reminds me, I love to say, it reminds me a little bit of like the Boney M Christmas album, that song, right? There's a bit of a vibe of that, like the like sort of poppy, dancey, but still it's a little bit laid back. I really love that song.
It's a great song. I really like it as well. And I love that it references Tibbs Eve. And I love that it references Tibbs Eve in a way that's not about going out and getting drunk. Because that seems to be sort of maybe
That's the
that's
thing. Yeah.
the pop cultural dominant discussion of Tibbs Eve these days. And it's not the version of Tibbs Eve that I grew up with particularly either. So I,
No.
you know, I love that you're speaking out for people who have a Tibbs Eve that doesn't necessarily involve alcohol.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love it because being hungover Christmas, then if you're out on Tibbs Eve, being hungover Christmas Eve really is not fun. But to me, it's just about so much more than that. And that sometimes is part of it. I've had years where I'm just home, you know what I mean? And it's still magical to me. Like I think, and as a kid, it's always just a bit of magic, a magical time where it really does feel time out of time. The night before, you know what I mean? Like sometimes the best part is before we get to what we think is the best part. And that's what Tibbs Eve means to me.
I'd like to thank the Duds for offering their take on Tibbs Eve. Check out the song Before the Night, Tibbs Eve, and a whole collection of original Duds Christmas songs wherever you stream music. There's a link to it in the podcast description. You can also hear a longer conversation with the Duds in episode 2 of this season of Strange Truths and Tall Tales, titled The Devil and the Duds. They talk about their Halloween music in that one. Sidebar. Phil referenced Boney M. Is the Boney M Christmas album as culturally relevant outside Newfoundland and Labrador as it seems to be here? I almost can't imagine a Santa Claus parade without it blasting from a loudspeaker. Still, I don't feel like I hear it mentioned much in the mainland media. I don't know. Feel free to enlighten me in the comments. And before we leave music behind completely, if you're into Christmas and holiday music, be sure to check out the blog productofnewfoundland.ca. I'm in the midst of my 3rd annual Newfoundland and Labrador Christmas Music Advent Calendar. I post a different Christmas song by a local artist every day from December 1st to the 24th. There's plenty of great stuff out there. Follow along. Okay. After just making a low-key argument that Tibbs Eve could be about more than just drinking, I'm going to undermine it all by turning my attention to Christmas slush. Back at the start of this episode, I referenced a social media post questioning whether certain things could really be called Christmas traditions. I completely recognized and owned Tibb's Eve. As far as I was concerned, it was definitely one of my traditions. One that was new for me was the idea of Newfoundland Christmas slush. I had no idea Christmas slush was a thing. I know some of you must be wondering what rock I lived under to have missed that one. Well, it was a rock in central Bonavista Bay. That's all I can tell you. The other day, I was scrolling through Instagram and happened across a post from local food blogger Instagrammer Jeremy Way, aka Stuff That In Your Gob. He was making a batch of Christmas slush. I reached out to him to see if he was interested in talking about the tradition with me. Fortunately, he said yes. So, I don't know that much about Newfoundland Christmas slush. It's something that I don't think I'd really even heard of more than 4 or 5 years ago. And I've been trying to learn a little bit about it, and I saw on Instagram the other day that you were making it. So that's why I reached out to you. What is Christmas slush?
Well, it's an amazing cocktail that us Newfoundlanders will have during the holiday season. You know, normally people will start making it towards the end of November, early December. It takes a couple days to freeze. I'll give you all my ingredients yet, but basically it's citrusy and it's super sweet, and you kind of water it down with your favorite, say, ginger ale or 7-Up drink. Also, can heavily be watered down with your flavored alcohol. So a lot of people will use vodka, and some people use amber rum. But the way that I make it, it's pretty simple actually in design. It's 1 cup of sugar in 6 cups of water. It's boiled out. So you get it nice and hot, and you throw the sugar in and mix it in. You're using, I think it's 2 tins of frozen OJ, frozen orange juice, 2 tins of frozen lemonade. Can be the pink lemonade, can be just regular old lemonade, but it's like the concentrated stuff. So it's 2 of each, and 1 large tin of pineapple juice. You mix everything together, and then you throw in 1 flask of your favorite alcohol. So we use vodka. It's not my favorite. I only drink vodka when I eat Newfoundland slush, but it helps everything freeze, but it gives it that more slushy type of a freeze effect. You don't get that solid chunk of frozen juice and water. You're getting that like easy to scrape out of a bucket or a container, and then you put some in a glass. You top it up with your ginger ale or 7-Up, and you put in some extra vodka if you want, But the vodka for me really helps it not freeze too hard. And I double my recipe because I love Newfoundland slush.
All right. So it does sound very citrusy, obviously, with the orange juice and stuff, kind of tropical sounding.
Yeah, it's the perfect little like pick me up. You're sitting around and you offer that glass of Christmas slush. It goes heavily with your party mix. It goes heavily with chocolate. Pretty much anything. I mean, everybody is going to enjoy a glass of slush. Like, it's probably too sweet for a lot of people, but everybody will have some.
Yeah, my experience, like I said, not knowing what slush was until relatively recently, I've only ever had it now, a couple of times probably, and that was one of my big takeaways. Is this is a very sweet drink.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, very sweet, and I think that's part of the reason why you would, hit it with some alcohol or hit it with some, like a ginger ale. Like for me, ginger ale is not super sweet. It's not like Pepsi or Coke or something like that, and it takes like that fizziness of the soda takes away from some of the bitterness and the sharpness of the sugar and the citrus, so it kind of like knocks it back a bit. So it packs a punch. It does. It packs a punch.
When did you start making slush? Like originally?
Okay, so I met my wife in 1996. Been married now a long time, with my wife for 27 years. I was 18 at the time, And that was the first time I heard about slush. And I lived in Newfoundland my whole life. And it wasn't a tradition in my family. And I even talked to my mom about it. And she's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Jennifer's parents, my wife's parents, are like, slush is huge. Where they were from, slush was a big thing. And it was like everyone got together over Christmas. Like, it came out like the 1st of December, say, and it was like it would hand over fist, it was gone. And then you were making another batch because people loved it. So I first heard about it like in 1996, a long time ago. I've been making it now myself for 27 years. And I even secretly make it during the summer because it's a great summertime drink when it's super hot outside.
I gotta say that is actually one of the, like, when I found out about slush, I that was one of the first things I thought is like, this is not something I would want to drink at Christmas time. This is a patio drink in summertime for me. That's where I think it would have its most appeal for me. I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, like and you're right, and it does have a lot of appeal on a hot summer's day, kind of thing. And it's 8 o'clock at night. It's still nice outside. It's warm, and you're having a few people over or whatever. Or you just break out some slush and water it down and enjoy a cool, cold. I can't say super refreshing, but it's a good cold way to cool down. It's a great drink.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, I think your citrusy version seems to be a very common, like that is like classic Newfoundland Christmas slush. But I do think there are other recipes. Have you ever, over the 27 years, have you tried anything different?
Yeah, definitely. So I've actually tweaked our recipe. The one I shared with you is one that was shared with me originally, was from my my in-laws, and that was actually given to them from their parents. So that's been on the go a long time. What I've learned over the years is I like to mix up my citrus a little bit. Instead of just going straight orange juice, straight lemonade and pineapple juice, I'm getting some mango juice in there. I'm getting some other banana flavored juices in there. So I tend to go and buy these multi-flavored type citrus juices that you can purchase, 1 liter containers, and I add those in. So I still have the orange juice, I still have the lemonade, but instead of using straight pineapple, I'm using variations of pineapple and strawberry and kiwi, even banana, raspberry. So anything citrusy or fruity flavored is going to change the way that comes out. Also changes the appearance, because traditionally when I grew up, we were hanging out with, my wife when I was first dating her and her parents, slush was just orange, always orange. Now, by changing, some of those ingredients, you're changing the appearance of it as well. So you can add it to make it more red, or to make it, bluish even. You can add whatever you want, really. Slush is just that citrusy drink that you make and you freeze and you bang a bit of alcohol in there and you have a good time. And that's exactly what it is. So, even earlier I mentioned I use vodka. People are using amber rum. People use different types of rums, and it gives it different flavors, and it also gives it different colors. And really, it's what you like. You can tweak it however you like. Some people don't like it as sweet. You can knock the sugar back a bit. Like there's tons of stuff you can do, and that's the beauty of living in Newfoundland, having that Newfoundland recipe passed down. It's probably already been changed a half a dozen or dozen times. So you're making it your own, because now it's mine. That's my recipe.
For some people, the salt beef bucket is very important in the slush making process. Is that something that's important in your slush making process?
It's not. It's funny you said that, because I grew up eating slush at my in-laws and having with them, enjoying, and that's how they made it. They always had the Chalkers beef bucket, and I was like, why is this? This is because that was commonly used. Most people had these buckets because the salt beef is what they would have, and they would have these buckets left over. So we reused everything. And that's how it became that way. And it was just it became a tradition throughout the years for people and their families to make it in the beef bucket. For me, it's not enough slush. I don't get enough. My yield is too small. So I like to double up my recipe. So I've had to compensate by buying a much bigger container to put it in. But it's not important to me. But what's important to me is that people recognize that still. Like, it's 2023 now, and that's been something that I would imagine my in-laws and their parents, were doing since, I would think, like the 40s, the 30s, the 40s, like, and passing it down. Like, and that was, it's a pretty cool tradition. Like, it's simple. It's like your slushy you get at the Quickie Mart or the Mini Mart, but it's enhanced the way the Newfoundlanders enhance things and change things. We make it our own, and the beef bucket just makes it more unique to Newfoundland.
That you mentioned, like, back to the 40s or whatever. That's one of the things that in trying to learn a little bit about the tradition in the province, it's really hard to pin down where it came from exactly and when it sort of exploded in popularity. Guesses seem to be 70s, 80s maybe, but who knows? Like, I mean, probably some people were drinking it before then. I don't know. It's a mystery.
And to me, like, I mean, I grew up in small town Torbay, Newfoundland, where there's a lot of old school traditions. Back when I was 18, like, there were still people going around mummering and all that stuff. And, like, I was like, when I met my wife, and she's like, "Do you want to have some Christmas slush?" And I'm like, "What the heck is that?" It's like, I have no idea. So I was, was oblivious to this at the age of 18, even growing up in a small town, a small community, and having roots in much smaller bay communities of Newfoundland where this was widely done, and I still didn't even know about it. So to know the exact origins of this, I don't know.
So with something like Christmas slush, do you? I mean, we've already established you drink at summertime sometimes, but as Christmas approaches, do you wait for the official start of the Christmas season before you dip into the slush, or once it's made, it's good to go?
Oh no, once it's made, it's good to go. Open game, baby. That stuff is like gold. Like, I mean, I can have 2 full glasses. Now, I'm a little bit different. I'm going to tell you this right now. I'm not your normal Newfoundlander. I'm not your traditional Newfoundlander. I go overboard with everything.
Okay.
So when I go slush, like, some guys are like, they go half a glass of slush, half a glass of ginger ale, and an extra splash of alcohol. I'm like, block the glass full of slush. Give me, like, maybe a couple tablespoons of the ginger ale. There's already enough alcohol in it for me. I like it more crunchy, more cold, more icy. Whereas other people like it super slushy, where they can drink through a straw. I have to eat my slush with a spoon.
That sounds good to me. I think I prefer slush with a spoon rather than the drink it with a straw variety. Mentioning growing up in Torbay and remembering mummers, did you ever mummer?
Never, no.
No, me either.
It's funny because I've been at kitchen parties and Christmas parties where there were mummers, but it's something I never ever done.
I've dressed up as a mummer one time in my life, and that was for my blog. I was writing about mummer murder last year, and I wanted pictures of a murderous mummer, so I volunteered to become that murderous mummer for the blog. That's the one time in my life. That's the closest I've ever gotten to mummering. How about Tibbs Eve? Is that a tradition you grew up with?
Not really. I mean, it was just more or less, like, it was never drinking for me. I mean, when I celebrated this stuff, I was hanging out with my parents, and they had some friends over, and my dad probably gets sloshed, and it was normal for that. But because it was the one day of the year kind of thing that nobody really cared. Everybody was doing it. Everybody was getting hammered, and it was just a great time had by all. And I was part of it, but I wasn't like, I never took that to my own family. Like, it's not something that myself and my wife do. We might go out and see some friends, but to really take it as a day to go drinking and a night to go drinking, for me, no, it was never really celebrated. I was around it quite a bit.
Yeah, I can't say. I guess my experience with Tibbs Eve is a little bit different too. I can't remember a time in my life that I didn't know that December 23rd was quote unquote Tibbs Eve. But the idea that it was a day that you drank was not something I encountered until like much later in my adulthood. So my earliest associations with the day really had nothing to do with alcohol at all. And maybe, maybe that was sort of more unique to my family, and everybody else in the province saw it as a drinking occasion, but it's certainly not one. That's not what I grew up with. That's not what I grew up understanding Tibbs Eve to be. So yeah, I think my relationship with it's a little bit weird, a little bit maybe not the current understanding of what the day is.
Yeah, and you know what? Everything changes too, Robert. Traditions are at the root of it are the same, but how we do things are different. Like, my brain works differently than my parents' brains worked.
Mm-hmm.
And the way they celebrated stuff back in the day, there's a lot of more. There was a much more carefree attitude, in the 50s and 60s about having complete strangers in your home. You know what I mean? Like people you didn't know, and they were dressed up. When you were mummering, say, you didn't know. You had to guess who these people were, and that was part of the fun of mummering. But now it's 2023. If I have somebody in my home dressed as a mummer and I don't know who you are, I don't feel all that comfortable anymore.
No.
It's a strange way of thinking about it, but it's a very different concept to me now as, a man in my mid 40s.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 18 years old and I was thinking, all my aunts and my uncles and everybody in the community are getting together and they're all dressing up like crazy people, and wearing the weirdest clothes and acting so foolish, and you have no idea who people are. That wasn't a strange concept back then. That was like normal. That was very normal.
No, I mean, I think mummering was always scary to a degree, but I think it was like a safe scary. Like you're saying, you didn't know who the mummers were or what they were going to do, but you sort of have confidence that when they were unmasked, they were your friends and family. And now you wouldn't have.
No doubt. Yeah, no, and you're right. I mean, I'm sure, but it's like it's a different mentality these days. Like the world has changed a lot, but I love that these traditions are still alive, and I love that some of these smaller communities in Newfoundland, and they get smaller every year, that they're still banging these things out. And you still hear of families and relatives still going out and doing these things and having a blast. Like it's stuff that we kind of take for granted. We don't do it as much anymore, and like Christmas seems to be very different these days than it used to be. Like I remember growing up as a kid asking for certain things for Christmas, and you got them, and the older you got, you were an adult now. You got what you wanted throughout the year. You went and bought it yourself. You didn't have to. So like that mentality of Christmas and mummering and slush and all these traditions, I think are starting to wean. But I love the fact that, you can still talk to your aunt out around the bay and it's like, oh yeah, big crowd in last night, bunch of mummers here. That's just great. Like to know that they still do that. And it's very nice to hear that this still happens.
Yeah, it is. I think like wrapping it back to the slush thing again for a minute. One of the things that I think appeals to me about the slush tradition is that this is like you make slush in bulk, so it's like you're making it you're making it knowing that you're going to have friends and family around you to help you consume it. That this is something like that. Christmas is going to be that. And I think that sort of speaks to what Christmas is like in Newfoundland still. It is a very social, family, friend-oriented event, and people get together, and you're going to have a crowd in your house, and you're going to want to have a lot of like a shared beverage that you can, share.
Exactly. No, and you're not wrong. I mean, we don't entertain very often throughout the year, but Christmas is the one thing that I feel like you just set aside your differences with people, you set aside your beefs, you set aside all the other things going on in your life, and you kick back and you relax. You try to ease into that Christmas break. You try to ease into those holidays, thinking and remembering family and having a good time. And slush just screams all that because it's something that brings people together. Like if I had a crowd of people in my house and I didn't have slush throughout the holidays, they would all be like, where is Jeremy's slush? Like, what is going on? What is, this is a staple in our home, and it's a staple for anyone who comes into our home, and they know us and they know that I'm passionate. I post about it all the time. every time I make slush.
That it's cool. I mean, it's a cool tradition. Slush aside, are there any other like Newfoundland food, anything else you've got to have at Christmas time?
Oh man, like if you see me in person other than my face, you could tell I like to eat sweets. So for me, anything sweet, but like, hand in hand slush, to me, slush you gotta have the party mix. You gotta have the party mix with the slush. And also one thing that we love to have with it is the chocolate covered almonds. Chocolate covered almonds, I won't eat. Honestly, I will not eat for 11 months out of the year. And I will eat a copious amount of chocolate covered almonds from December 1 to December 31. And I don't know why, but it's sort of like that's it. That's when I have those chocolate covered almonds, and there's a cake. I remember my grandmother used to make this cake. I don't know what the official name of this cake was. It was just light cake. That's what it was called. Light cake. And she also, believe it or not, made a cake that was called dark cake.
Oh, I totally believe it. Actually, I have my mother's dark fruitcake recipe on my website, and I get so many hits on that page. Not even my recipe. People, I'd love it if people were visiting my site for things that I do, but that's not really true. They're visiting it for my mother's Christmas cake recipe.
But hey, look, they're there, and
Hey.
you're sharing the joy of dark fruitcake.
Yeah. I always joke there in Newfoundland that there are the fruitcake wars. It's either you're either a light fruitcake person or a dark fruitcake person. And,
Yeah.
I'll eat either, but I'm definitely team dark fruitcake.
Well, it's funny, and because I grew up not really liking the fruitcake part of it, I always liked the molasses cake part of it.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'd pick out the scattered piece of fruit or cherry or whatever and just eat the cake. But this light cake that I'm talking about that my grandmother used to make, basically it was just like a vanilla. It was almost like a vanilla pound cake with raisins.
All right.
But believe it or not, it was actually mixed and put into, I believe it was like an old pineapple juice can or like a ketchup can or something, and it was topped with tinfoil, put in a pot, and you'd put the water around the can in the pot, and it would boil
Okay.
in a pot. It wasn't actually baked in an oven.
All right.
And then she used to make like a sugary water sauce or a watery sugar sauce, I guess. However you want to say it, probably sounds better, watery sugar sauce. That you would heat up and pour over this cake, and it would soak in all this sugary mixture. And it was a great cake. And I can tell you right now, over Christmas when I was growing up, we would fight over who got the last piece of that. And I mean fight, like argue, really, really down to it. Not the fisticuffs, not the punching and smacking, but we would have heated arguments as to who was getting that last little bit of Nan's light cake because it was delicious.
Do you have her recipe?
I have it, and I'll admit that I tried it a couple of times. I failed miserably, and I opted to just put it to bed. No one's gonna make it like my Nan made it. I have the recipe. I follow it to a T. It comes out dunch. It comes out like a mash of stuff that you wouldn't even want to look at, let alone eat.
I tried my mother's steamed pudding one time, and dunch was a good word for the result I got out of that too.
Right? Yeah, for sure.
Okay, aside from the things that we make and those kind of traditional foods, any food recommendations for anybody to check out over the Christmas break? Restaurants they should go to?
Yeah, Christmas to me is all about family, friends, having a good time, but also being comfortable, having comfort food. Comfort food to me would be that one thing that, just melts in your mouth or instantly takes you back or makes you feel like a kid again or just makes you feel all warm and fuzzy inside, however which way you look at that. comfort food just makes you feel good. And, you know, that to me, like, that's like, you know, a good homemade turkey soup, or say some good homemade pea soup, baked bread, sweet rolls, you know, buns that were baked with an extra bit of sugar in them, and you'd put butter on them when they first come out of the oven. You know what I'm talking about? That sort of stuff. You can get that stuff, you know, in very select places, but there's some good restaurants around, you know, St. John's that I would frequent. You know, Rustler's Family Restaurant on Torbay Road has a great menu for that stuff. There's a place called, I think it's called the Port House or something like that on Topsail Road. Has some great traditional Newfoundland food. You know, there's so many places, and I'm just at a loss to think of what places that you could go to get this stuff. But almost every little mom and pop takeout or mom and pop, you know, restaurant shop around the bay or even locally around the city, they'll always have pea soup. They'll always have turkey soup, clubhouse sandwiches, you know, just your plain old home fries. Like, that stuff is comfort. That's the stuff that I want to have over the holidays. It just makes me feel so good because you're getting the things that you don't normally have every other day. Like, I don't eat pea soup every day. I don't eat pea soup every week, but I have pea soup a couple times a year, and over Christmas is one. Right. Another big tradition for me would be moose stew. So moose stew is something every year. My father would get a moose for many years. He had his license, and for many years he would have, you know, moose steaks, moose sausage, and all that stuff, and bottled moose, whatever. But Christmas Eve we would make moose stew, and moose stew was like enough to feed an army, and you could be eating it for days, but you'd sit down and eat a bowl, and you'd be like, "Oh, this moose is so good, and this soup is so good, this stew is so good." You know, big chunks of potato, big chunks of turnip, big chunks of carrot, and just a good heavy gravy sauce in there. And, you know, but moose is so traditional in Newfoundland, so it's just one of those things. And I carry that tradition on. So anytime I get my hands on some moose, it's for Christmas. It's for Christmas Eve moose stew, because it's just one of those things that you got to have over Christmas. Like, I don't care for it all year. Got to have it over Christmas.
It sounds good. It sounds like a really good winter meal, you know, the kind of thing that's going to warm you up. And like you said, something like that, you're going to want something like that at Christmas time, that comfort food.
100%. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And you need it. And like, it's funny because like those traditions again in Newfoundland where we would hunt for food, we would hunt that moose, we would, you know, you would have all that in the freezer and it would be there just like a codfish, you know, you'd have it there for as long as you could keep it. And it was to sustain your family. Now it's different. 2023, you know, not very many people need to hunt for food to survive. You know, years and years ago, it was a source of providing for your family. You needed it. You needed to get through the winter. You needed food that would last a long time. Now it's just like the tradition is still there. You have it, but it's for different reasons. You're remembering it for different reasons. You're having it for different reasons. My father passed away in 2019, and one thing that he used to love to do was have salt cod on an open fire. So we'd wrap it up in tinfoil and throw some butter in there and throw it in the fire. Let it cook up, pick it out of the fire, you know, that hot tinfoil, pick it apart, and you would eat it with a piece of buttered bread. Like piece of buttered bread and salt fish with some butter on it, sitting in the woods having a fire. Like, so it's one tradition that I've kept going every year after January the 27th, when my father passed away. I will always go outside and have a fire and cook saltfish. And it's not necessarily a Christmas thing, but it's around Christmas because that's when he passed away. So for me, it's another tradition that I've added to my list of things to do around the Christmas holidays and the Christmas break. And it just brings you so much joy.
Yeah, I think food and food traditions. I don't know. There's nothing maybe that connects you more to your family than that history of the shared meals and what you used to eat when and doing those things in the future really just brings you back to the time when you were growing up and you kind of took those things for granted, I think.
You're correct, 100%. Because when you're in your mid 40s and you start to think about the people that you've lost and people that you knew and the people that you were around, and you start to think about, what should I be doing or what can I be doing? And these are the types of things that once you start doing them, those traditions, it brings you back. You're still connected to these people in these ways. And, even though they're gone or you don't see them very often, you're still connected. You can pick up the phone anytime and call your aunt out around the bay and be like, hey, can I get that blueberry tart recipe? And she's like, oh, yeah, no sweat. And then 4 days later, someone's at your door with a blueberry tart from your Nan out in Centerville. You're like, holy cow. Like, this is just, like, how did this happen? I only asked you for the recipe, and now I have a full tart that you basically hand delivered to me. And it's like those types of things, that mentality, those traditions, so that happiness feeling that you get from being so grateful, but also being so helpful and friendly. Like, that's what Christmas is all about. That's what those traditions are all about. And you're connected in so many ways that you don't even realize it. And when you're in your mid-40s, you start to think back about all those things.
I agree. I mean, I was in my mid-40s really when I started this whole blog thing, which is really about looking into, I guess my culture and my relationship with my culture. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's what it is. Maybe I'm at a point in my life where I'm getting a little bit nostalgic about things, and I want to understand the past and how that reaches into the present a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
So I guess on that note, where can people find you on social media?
Well, that's pretty easy. You can search for Jeremy Way, but I mean, why would you want to do that when you can type in @stuff that in your gob? I came up with that name with a friend a couple of years ago in Halifax. We were up for a little visit, and it was actually over Halloween. So we were there, we did a Halloween party, and we did some food. We ate out a lot, and my friend Leanne was like, you should start this thing. You should start this food blog. You talk about the food you eat, the food you make, and all that stuff. And I post about it on Facebook a lot. She says, why don't you go to Instagram and start this thing up? So we came up with a name, started it up a couple of years ago. And it's all about everything I eat, everything I make, everything I do food-wise. Like, it could be, good reviews, could be not so great reviews. I don't really leave bad reviews, but it's not really that kind of page. It's basically to just tell the people of the world what I eat and what I like to eat.
And I will say, as somebody who's been following you for most of while you've been on Instagram, I would say it's informative and it's entertaining and the photography's good. So people,
thank you. I mean,
people should
for sure. I mean, and I would appreciate that very much. But it's not about, for me, it's not about gaining followers. It's not about, there's a lot of pages out. There's a lot of hype out there about, I need to have this many followers and I need to be better than this one. And, I take pictures with my cell phone. I don't really care so much about the lighting. If I don't get a real great picture, I don't post it. But if I don't get a real great picture, I don't fuss about it either. I just eat what I'm eating and I just go about my day. Sometimes I won't make a post for a few days. But it's just fun, and I like to put a little bit of my personality into my posts. I'll do funny videos. Well, I think they're funny. And I'll make clips, and I'll just make random posts. And sometimes it's my dog, and sometimes it's the snow, or sometimes it's something foolish in the mall parking lot. It can be anything at all, but it's just about everything I put there is like stuffing it in your face. And that's exactly what it's called. Stuff that in your gob. It's not just food. It's everything. It's my life.
And you're doing a great job getting it out there and making it entertaining. So like I said, definitely, if you're on Instagram, go check it out. All that talk of comfort food, it's making me hungry. Jeremy mentioned his father's enjoyment of salt cod. Christmas is basically the only time of year I want to eat saltfish. When I was growing up, my family always had saltfish and sweet raisin bread on Christmas Eve. They still do. As a kid, I complained about eating it. I didn't really like it at all. Truthfully, from a flavor standpoint, I still don't love it now. But come Christmas Eve, it's all I want. It just wouldn't be Christmas Eve without it. Tradition is weird like that. Check out Jeremy's Instagram at StuffThatInYourGob. Now it's time for something different, something monstrous. I'm capping off each episode this season with a segment called Monstrous Things, where I recount a tale of a Newfoundland sea monster recorded in the mainstream media. I'm throwing that out the window for this episode, though, for the sake of Christmas. Today, I'm venturing into the realm of full-on legend, with boo beggars, boo darbies, and a strange creature called Rockyfoot. I remember one childhood Christmas Eve when I couldn't get to sleep. Not because I was excited. I was terrified of Santa Claus. I mean, he sees you when you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake. 40-some years later, I still sympathize with 6-year-old me. Santa had been watching me, no, he'd been judging me for weeks, and on that very night, he was going to be in my house. I was certain I'd wake and see his silhouette in my bedroom door as he completed his final tally of my naughty to nice ratio. It was a scary thought. I'm fortunate, I guess, that I grew up when I did, really. Before the anxiety-inducing shelf elves, but after the really terrifying Christmas creatures of old faded into the shadows. 'Cause, if Santa Claus scared me, I shudder to think the breakdown Krampus would have induced. Krampus is a demon-like figure from Central Europe. He's sort of a counterpoint to St. Nicholas. While St. Nick rewards the nice, Krampus punishes the naughty. To put it mildly, Krampus is a disturbing figure. He is depicted as a hairy humanoid with cloven hooves. He has the horns of a goat and a long, pointed tongue. He carries a branch to swat naughty children and a basket he can use to steal them away. He was a powerful way to get children to behave. I don't know that many early Newfoundlanders had any cultural connections to Krampus, but some of them had ties to other anti-Clauses. Much as Krampus was a counterpoint to St. Nick, for some Newfoundlanders, a being named Rockyfoot was an alternative to Santa Claus. Where Santa gave gifts, Rockyfoot filled Christmas stockings with stones. To be honest, that's about all I know about Rockyfoot. I've come across exactly one mention of him in my reading. He was described in John Widdowson's 1977 text, If You Don't Be Good. Widdowson collected a reference to the character in Terrenceville. I have no idea how widely held the belief was. I suspect not very, and Widdowson's informant didn't supply any description of Rockyfoot's appearance. That leaves a lot of scope for imagination. I'd like to think Rockyfoot crawled up the cliffs from the cold North Atlantic every December 24th looking for naughty children. His skin, mottled and pallid, would be covered in barnacles and seaweed. He might have had long, bony, tuckamore-twisted fingers in which he'd clutch a handful of pebbles, perhaps bits of ballast from sunken ships. He'd slip the stones to naughty children, and maybe, if the child collected enough, the weight of gifted stones would pull them to a watery grave. I don't know. I'm new at writing cautionary horror. Anyway, whatever he was hardly alone in terms of supernatural beings keeping naughty children in line. Rockyfoot may have delivered a disappointing stocking filler on Christmas morning, but a contingent of boo creatures, boo darbies, boo beggars, and boo men lurked in the shadows of Newfoundland, threatening something darker than rocks and socks. These figures were sinister beings. They were believed to be interested in abducting children. They are similar, I suppose, to the more widely recognized boogeyman. Often these boo folks were said to be active at night or lurking in dangerous places. They were used as threats to keep children safe. Kids were told things like, if you're not home by dark, the boo man will take you. Or stay away from the cliffs, the boo darby lives there. Unlike Rockyfoot, whose danger was most acutely felt in the lead up to Christmas, these boo folk were dangerous all year round. The boo darby might have seemed especially scary in December, though. While it's not exactly clear what a boo darby is, though they're sometimes described as horned creatures, I think it's interesting to consider that on some parts of the island, darby means mummer. Newfoundland Christmas mummers, despite the sort of benign tea towel depictions we see these days, could be pretty scary. They were mysterious strangers who spoke in strange voices and created mischief. It wasn't all wearing mother's big 42 bra, either. Mummer costumes often involved animal skins and horns, and in some cases were designed to deliberately frighten. Parents sometimes used the threat of mummers to get children to behave. I can't draw a direct line between mummers and boo derbies. That is, I can't say one was the inspiration for the other. But together, sightings and warnings of boo derbies must have combined to make each experience much scarier than it would have been on its own. In that, the boo derby is a bit unique from the other boo characters. They really could sort of tie it down to an actual physical mummer-type being that they'd seen. Krampus and Rockyfoot were supernatural creatures most children would only know through stories. Mummers and derbies were verifiable flesh and bone beings that descended on the community every Christmas. Their physical presence must have made the danger seem entirely too real, and therefore a pretty effective deterrent. It's all a bit weird to me, but it's like they say, I guess. You get more flies with honey, but when it comes to raising kids, the threat of an omnipresent rocky boo beastly mummer thing really makes them toe the line. And that's it for this Christmassy episode. If you got stories about or different perspectives on Tibb's Eve, Newfoundland Christmas Slush, or Boo Derbies, I'd love to hear about it. The comments are always open. Thanks again to the Duds. Check out Before the Night, Tibb's Eve. It's available right now. And to Jeremy Way. You can find him on Instagram at StuffThatInYourGob. There are links on the episode page. Stay tuned for more Newfoundland Christmassy stuff from productofnewfoundland.ca and right here on Strange Truths and Tall Tales. Till next time, mind the boo derbies, or maybe, if Rockyfoot comes calling, offer him a glass of slush. Couldn't hurt.